Hey, sorry about that. I stepped out to, well, let's just say it's been a while since I've had the chance to focus on this channel, and now that things have changed for the better, it was great to be back in the driver's seat. For those of you new to the channel, hi, I'm Ambro. My content is all about keeping the average gamer informed about upcoming releases, highlighting indie games that you may not have heard of otherwise, and retrospectives on what makes older games so great. There's so much happening in the day-to-day that it can be hard to keep up with gaming news and new releases, so if I can make it easier for someone to get that information, then I feel like I've done my job. All of that being said, today we're diving into Avowed, Obsidian Entertainment's most ambitious project yet. Set in the world of Aora, this highly anticipated RPG has been in development for over 5 years, and there's tons of hype surrounding it. If you've played Pillars of Eternity, Fallout New Vegas, Pentiment, or The Outer Worlds, you know Obsidian doesn't mess around when it comes to deep, narrative-driven RPGs. And Grounded, which is a great game in its own right. Avowed releases on February 18th, 2025, and if you're eager to jump in early, the Premium Edition will give you 5 days of early access starting February 13th. The game will be available on the Xbox Series X, Series S, and PC, including Steam, the Xbox app, and Battle.net for some reason. And yes, it's also coming to Game Pass on day 1. So hit that like and subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it, and let's get into it. I want to start with the setting here because I think that Avowed is going to introduce a ton of new gamers to the PoE universe. Picture this, you're an envoy to the Adir Empire, dispatched to investigate a mysterious plague called the Dream Scourge that's threatening to destroy the living lands. But this isn't your typical hero saves the world kind of story. You'll be navigating complex political tensions and ancient mysteries. You play as a godlike, which is not that common following the events of Pillars of Eternity 2, and the Living Lands isn't just another fantasy setting. You're stepping into a lit powder keg of colonial ambitions, native resistances, ancient powers, and the Adir Empire isn't exactly the quote-unquote good guy here. They're just one faction amongst many vying for control. You're going to need to navigate relationships of factions fighting for independence, mysterious religious orders, and mercenaries, and it's a combination of all these different variables that keeps the Living Lands, well, living and on your toes. On top of the volatile political background that Avowed will plunge you into, another major factor in this world is the Dream Scourge. It's a plague that isn't your standard fantasy disease, more or less. It's affecting people's dreams, their souls, and their connection to reality itself. It progressively affects its targets until it becomes a dreamfall, which are the violent final effects of the Dream Scourge. It also causes fungi to grow all over their body, and it's afflicting people, animals, and even vegetation. Oh, and the leaders of the oh-so-civilized Adiran Empire have sent you, a godlike, to the Living Lands as an envoy to find out more. As you investigate, you'll uncover connections to ancient magic, forgotten civilizations, and powers that might have been left better undisturbed. The deep lore of the PoE universe is a huge part of its draw, and I can't wait for people to discover it for the first time in Avowed. Let's move on to the character creator, and this is actually probably the most disappointing part of the entire game, because, as I had mentioned earlier, you do play as a godlike, but your races are limited to human or elf. I imagine that this is due to the scope of the game. This is a complete bummer from a role-playing perspective, but as we'll discuss shortly, things do get better. Now, when creating your character, you actually get to choose your character's background, of which you have 5 options. You have Scholar, Augur, Scion, Scout, and War Hero, each of which will affect your starting stats, dialogue options, and more. And we might as well just transition into the next section, which is talking about the real RPG stuff, which is progression, dialogue options, companions, and so on. So let me get this out of the way. You can be evil. There, video done. Just go buy it. Okay, but for real, this is a true RPG. You can immediately be evil, and I love that for Avowed. It also adds another layer for replayability. As someone who tends to play a good guy on one playthrough and an anti-hero on another playthrough, this flexibility in how I voice and build out my character checks off all the boxes for me. This is a choice-driven RPG, and the world and characters will be affected by those choices. Those backgrounds we spoke about a minute ago, there are going to be background-specific dialogue options that you'll have access to early and often, from what I can gather. The developers themselves have emphasized this point, and frankly, it's Obsidian. I trust their judgment when it comes to making great RPGs. Now, to that point, the game has said that you cannot kill every single NPC, especially ones that have scripted narrative choices that affect the game, which makes complete sense. And like any good story, the weight and consequences of your actions won't immediately be felt. You will only see and feel those outcomes later on in the game, which I feel keeps you on your toes. If you think of games like The Outer Worlds or Fallout New Vegas, you know that they have those ending cards that tells you what happened after you made each one of the big choices. I imagine this is going to be very similar.
I can't wait for it.
Next up, as far as party and skills management goes, if you've played Baldur's Gate 3 recently, Avowed actually uses a similar camp-type system that you can always come back to your party camp and upgrade your skills and chat to companions, which I feel is a really nice touch. Now, your own character's abilities will evolve based on how you choose to play. There are distinct branches for the styles of play, such as Fighter, Ranger, and Wizard. You also have a godlike section, which I'll touch on shortly, and then obviously your companions. What's really nice here is the ability to dual wield, which we will get into a little bit later, but in Avowed, you can have each hand do something completely different from the other. So if you want a wand in one hand and a pistol in the other, you can do that. Sword and shield? Cool. And the godlike abilities, to my understanding, are more or less story or choice based, so they become available at a certain cadence as you play through the game. And of course, your companions will also gain abilities which you can distribute to upgrade existing skills or unlock new ones, similar to the way that you can in Mass Effect games. Also, one more thing about your character's background is that it does affect how NPCs react to you and your own companions. You'll get unique quest abilities as well as unique starting abilities and knowledge that you would not have had otherwise. While none of these things are particularly new to role-playing games, it's good to know that these staples have been considered and implemented. Frankly, without these options, I think it waters down the experience a bit. One great example of how these aspects make the world feel alive, there was a preview recently done by IGN where they came across a vendor who had a bad history with your companion Kai, who's also voiced by Garrus Vakarian from Mass Effect, and warn him not to cross her again. It's just a short dialogue banter, but it's the small things like this that really help make the world feel alive and reactive. This is a great sign for RPG fans. Speaking of companions, each companion does have unique combat abilities, personal quest lines, and dynamic reactions and banter to your choices and other companions and NPCs, like that example I just shared, as well as special combo moves that you can pull off. I keep bringing up Mass Effect for a good reason, not just because of my love Garrus Vakarian, because you can also pull off combat combos similar to that in that franchise. And frankly, that on-the-fly banter that Mass Effect also tends to do really well, it's actually more difficult to get right than you might think. Obsidian seems to have excelled in this respect, and companions are going to feel real. You're going to get to know them intimately. Right, Garrus? I mean, Kai. Anyway, let's dive deeper into the combat because Obsidian has taken some intuitive approaches here to keep the combat fresh. I know that some people can feel some type of way about first-person combat games, so let's get this major point out of the way. You can play the game in both third-person and first-person. A long-standing point of division amongst gamers is when games lock gamers out from having that choice, so kudos to Obsidian for providing that. As I mentioned earlier, the game features a dual-wielding system that goes beyond just holding two weapons. You can have a sword in one hand and cast spells with a wand in the other. You can dual-wield pistols for a gunslinger approach. Maybe you want to have a shield and a wand for a battle mage. There is, of course, magic in Avowed. You're going to have everything from elemental magic to nature-based magic, blood magic, and so on. It's going to be a core part of your combat strategy. If you want to, you can totally just set fire to all the enemies, and that's not nothing. You're going to have access to godlike abilities as well, which you can mix and match with your companions to pull off some really spectacular combos. If you wanted to, you could totally just spam spells with your wand and glug potions, or you can slow it down and pause the action to issue commands to your companions for a more tactical approach. I'll touch on this briefly because it's fairly standard affair here. While it's not a stereotypical open world, Avowed does feature large interconnected zones packed with NPCs and content. The overall world Obsidian has built here is huge, make no mistake. As far as game mechanics go, you get tons of freedom and agency. There's swimming, climbing, and a dynamic weather system to help keep things fresh as you explore. There's environmental interaction as well as side activities with ancient ruins to explore, hidden treasures, optional dungeons, and even monster hunting contracts. One really quick thing to point out here on the technical breakdown of graphics for Avowed, it's very nice to see Obsidian push out the boat on this one with the support of Xbox and Microsoft, since they're not really known for pushing out technical boundaries. Not that their games look poor, while the character and NPC animations still have that classic stilted Obsidian motion to them, in dialogue at least, this is far and away Obsidian's most technically ambitious project yet. Built exclusively for current generation hardware, Avowed is going to offer ray trace lighting and shadows, advanced particle effects, the most detailed character animations they've ever had, vast draw distances, and that dynamic time of day system. All in all, that's Avowed for you. What I feel is going to set it apart is a blend of deep storytelling, dynamic combat, and a rich, reactive world. Avowed is shaping up to be an RPG, whether you're a seasoned explorer of Obsidian's work, or you're stepping into their worlds for the first time. As always, if you enjoyed this video or found it informative, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to get allegedly instant notifications on when a new video drops. And let me know down in the comments, what aspect of Avowed are you most excited about? The combat? The story? Maybe you're just excited to see what Obsidian's been cooking? Until next time, this is Ambro, keeping you informed about games that matter. Peace out.